Board.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to June 9th, the episode of Concepts with Kalanta with DJ AFX. Aryan Furuzbaht, Doctor Extraordinaire, is going to be up in a few minutes. We're just getting through some technical issues like we always do. Grab a coffee, grab some tea, have some brekkie. We'll be right with you.
Do you want me to move that microphone out of the way for us, dude? There you go. Just so it's out of the picture. There you go. Perfect. You're alright there, mate?
Just jumping on the...
Right, just move this out of the way. Do you need this up?
No, I was checking to see if it was live streaming. Are we restreaming at the moment?
It's up there, yeah.
Good.
Should be. It's not there then? Yeah.
Well, it takes a second. Sorry, it's May 25th.
Ah.
That's okay. That's okay. Take all the pictures you want. This is a weird recent posts. The reason it doesn't seem to be.
To ask me to buy transcoding errors.
Why would you want to buy
I don't
transcoding?
know, but let's just ask.
Let's
just do it.
What does transcoding mean? Like this. Come on. You're buying it for my show.
No, it's yours. It's ours, bro. I don't know what even that means. I've never even been asked that before. This is what we do.
Oh, no, it's live.
It's
It is
live?
live. It is live. Okay,
Okay.
1 second.
I'll just do it.
Aryan Furuzbaht, Doctor. No, you don't need to transcode anything, man.
I'll just do it anyway. Oh, you want to go?
Yeah,
Just
we're fine.
Do it.
Episode 5. So if you want, it's going to be up on my personal Facebook. You can share it. What that means, if you like.
And then when you press transition, you're ready to go, but don't do it before I'm behind
That'll look a bit suspicious.
Alright, water's there. All
Amazing.
good.
Thank you so much.
Liam, you are the
I'll be
man.
outside anyway, boys, so I'm just going to cruise
Cheers.
and chill out around here for you outside.
Thank you.
If
You're the
you have any
best.
problems, man, just give me a call.
Thanks, Liam. You're the
I'll
guy.
be watching.
My boy, Blue.
You're my boy.
You good to go?
Yep.
Cool. Hello, everybody. Welcome to June 9th Concepts with Kalanta. This week's concept is music production. My guest today is a very amazing person who is a jack of all trades and a master of some, Dr. Aryan Furuzbaht, a physician and also probably one of the Iranian community's most well-respected and well-regarded music producers and DJs, DJ AFX. Welcome to my show, Dr. AFX.
Thank you so much, John, for having me. Pleasure to be on the show.
By way of background, Aryan and I are actually friends. I had the pleasure of meeting him when he moved to Australia several years ago, and he's just been a good friend and a good dude. I had no idea when I first met him that he was a DJ known as DJ AFX. So I'm Iranian by background, but not really by disposition. I don't know much about my culture as much as other people, and when people found out that, oh, you're friends with DJ AFX, apparently it was quite a big deal. So I looked into him, and he's a really big deal, which is just, it's very funny because I never met him in that context. And, I always liked him completely outside of it. But one of the important things that's kind of come out of it is I've sort of gotten from our conversations and sort of like the time we've spent together a real appreciation of the art and the skill that goes into making amazing music. So I guess I'll start with this. How did you get into it?
Well, first, again, thanks so much for having me, Jahan. I think it started more when I was younger. Like, I started playing piano since I was a kid, and I loved music. I would always start with just classical piano, and my piano teacher would always be going over, like, the technical aspects, but I would always try to branch out of it. Like, I love classical music, but I would always want to create something extra and improvise and practice improvising. And nowadays, that's a lot of what I do. Like, I still play the piano, but I'm not like playing much of the classical music anymore. I'm just improvising or making my new music, like just producing. And I think it was because of that, and it just grew. And I started playing guitar for a little bit, and then started experimenting with DJing when I was in high school, and then it sort of grew from there. You know.
That's it's I'm only going to spend a little bit of time on this because it's fascinating to me. I'm sure it's fascinating to people listening at home. You're a physician. You're a doctor by trade. That is your profession. Is that correct?
Yeah,
That's right. And it baffles me because that's such a demanding. It's such a really rigorous, difficult kind of role to fill. Has that kind of discipline, that rigor, that training, has that sort of informed or assisted you in your musical training, or did the musical training bring? Well, you were a musician first before you became a doctor. Did it sort of inform that, help that, build that?
I mean, I think they sort of worked hand in hand with one another. Like, I use, I would say music is more my stress reliever in a way, because like work is so busy and sometimes it's just a lot of things going on. So I would use it more as something as an outlet, just because there's a lot of things going on and something that I can sort of put my emotions into and put everything else into. So maybe not so much, but yeah.
Well, and so you started as kind of classically trained. You were doing that kind of thing.
Yeah.
What made you decide that what the way that music is being produced, I've got my own spin on it. I've got my own taste to it. How did you develop this identity as AFX? Like, who is AFX for our listeners who are not Iranian or who you may don't know who you are?
Yeah.
Why don't you give us kind of a backstory into how you became this guy, what this guy represents, what you're about?
Oh, like to be honest, like when I was growing up, like in high school, I was listening to a lot of famous trance DJs, and I would just kind of like idolize them. For example, Armin van Buuren. I would listen to his podcast, The State of Trance. I'd be tuning in all the time and like just following it religiously. And then I was like, you know what? Like the technology had sort of advanced as well. Back like maybe 10, 20 years ago, you didn't have laptops and things like that where you can just easily download a software and DJ and like make music. So it's easily accessible. I'm like, you know what? Maybe I should try some of this. So I started DJing. I started like just playing for like high school parties, for my friends' parties and things like that. And it was just like, I guess it was my love of just wanting to connect with people and get like people to sort of get the vibe going and get like, I don't know, spread some sort of positivity in a way. And then after a while, when I started DJing a little bit, experimenting, I'm like, you know what, maybe I should try making some music as well, because I had some experience with like, piano and going through that, like the Royal Conservatory and things like that. So I started experimenting a little bit. I started collaborating with some of like Iranian artists that were well known at the time, and I just kept it to the standard where, you know what, if I'm going to put something out, it's going to be something good. Like either I put something out that I really like and has a lot of emotion behind it, or I'm not going to release it at all, And it just sort of grew step by step. There was a lot of bumps in between. Like some people were like, "Oh, this guy, like he's just like a bedroom DJ or whatever." Like there was a lot of people that sort of maybe rejected the path, and like, you know what? But I just kept going. Like, and
haters.
I know, but
it's funny. As I speak to different guests, we've had people here who are property investors, people here who are business people, startup people, philosophers. And I think the thing that's coming through with all concepts is if you want to be good at your concept, you're going to have to deal with a lot of haters. And
oh yeah, definitely.
there are a lot of people who are just awful.
Yeah.
But so you kind of trained, you did your thing, you developed this AFX identity. When you say spreading positivity, spreading love, doing emotion, what does that mean to you? Because I think I want to kind of drill down on that concept a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, if we think of like music as any kind of thing that we consume, like every day we're consuming different things. We're consuming food, we're consuming content from like media, social media on Instagram, all those kind of things. I think music is something that we're consuming on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
That music that you have like enjoying, it's gonna pass on a certain emotion. And what I try to do, for example, for my podcast is to instill a certain emotion every month. The podcast called Dubways. Um, Try to pass that on to people, and like maybe if they're going through a hard time, like try to get them through that hard time. At least if there's something that I could do, it'd be kind of cool, and to connect with all kinds of people. And even in music production, sometimes I might not make like a really upbeat song. It might be kind of like an emotional beat, but it's hopefully something that people can relate to and sort of connect with. So always, whenever I produce something or do anything, like I always try to put some emotion behind it because it makes it a little bit more meaningful.
And how does your personal experience affect the artistic process? So if you're going through a tough time,
Oh yeah, definitely.
did you find that sort of feeds into this?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there was one track that we released. It was a collaboration with a couple of famous Iranian artists. That was probably like my biggest hit. This song
Well,
that I mean,
what was the name of the song?
it's a Persian song. Like it's called Dadim Raftoro. Anyways, it's kind of like it's this sort of love story. Like it's like this down tempo like hip hop rap beat, and has this nice piano melody. And I remember at the time when I was just playing on the piano one night, I was just recording, and I just suddenly came up with this concept. And the idea of it was just like basically two people that were together, but they really couldn't be with each other. And then there's just sort of this dark beat. And at the time, I was just going through a lot of different things, and I just channeled all of that into the music, and then it became this like very good song. And the other artists that collaborated with me on it, like I think picked up on that and became a big hit. Yeah.
Do you find it cathartic? Does it really help you? Well, yeah. I'll give you some background. I am not the connoisseur of music, but
I'm sure you are.
I thoroughly enjoy listening to your dubways. I started out because you're my friend, and I thought, my friend's doing something. Much like I'm sure many of you people watching this podcast are doing, as a courtesy to me. But over time, I've really come to enjoy it. I've really come to see it and experience it, and I think that. I find it's a really good mirror into at least how you're doing in the recent little window. And do you think that that's something that perhaps more people could be doing? Finding some sort of emotional release.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. I mean, yeah.
Well, let's look at it from a different experience or a different angle. How did you? There's clearly some technical skills that need to be developed to do the kind of stuff you did. What software do you use? Is there a software that you use?
Oh, yeah.
Is there talk me through it. I don't know what production is at all.
Yeah.
What do I do? I'm going to produce a song. Jahan's producing song number one. What do I download? What do I do?
Exactly. So I probably get this question at least 3 times a week. Like I'm not joking. Like people message me. They're like what kind of software do you use? What are the things they use? Right now, I use for music production, I use Logic, and then for my podcast, I use Ableton. Yeah. Before, I used to use Ableton for everything. To be honest, it doesn't really matter. Like at the end of the day, the software that you use, it's whatever you're most comfortable with. And at the end of the day, I like using Logic. It's very easy. And there's a lot of plugins. Like I can go into the details, but there's a lot, like so many different plugins that you have to use. For example, there's like Spire, or if you want to use some mastering plugins, you can use like Isotope, or there's Waves plugins. There's just a lot of things at a person's disposal now. Because back in the day, maybe you couldn't use all these things. You had to go into a proper studio, but now you have all of these things accessible from your laptop, which is great.
How nuts is that?
Yeah,
How nuts is that? That's one of the. I'm just double checking to see that we're live and going. Yes, we are. Huzzah! So what is this? Jumping on the. Jumping on the. Wow, sorry, that was some. That was just me being rude. Checking my
So-
phone in the middle of a thing. But so essentially, the technology is there and it's accessible to everyone.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And is it your what do you say about the experience that have you found that the zeitgeist right now is pretty receptive to, you called it a bedroom DJ.
Yeah.
Do you think that now it's a little bit more acceptable than maybe when you were coming up?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I think that the important thing is, as long as you're producing something good, I don't think it matters. You know, at the end of the day, if you're producing something that's a hit or the production quality is very high, like, I don't think anyone will fault you for that. Like, I know there's a lot of hits that have come out from people that are just producing on their just basic software, and that's great. Of course, the next level, and it will definitely make the song better, is if you go into a studio, if you have all these production software, if you have all these mixing engineers. But I'm just saying, as a basic step, like, people want to start, they can definitely use like basic software. I mean, I use these things at the beginning, but then I also collaborate with like mixing engineers and like artists that have proper studios. So that's another caveat. Like, I might make the beat, but in the end, it might get mixed in a studio somewhere else. It might be in like, I don't know, Europe somewhere. It might be in Iran. Like, it might be in different places. So
Well, with regards to that, what are some lessons that you learned early on? Like, you can go now, I'm teleporting you back in time.
Yeah.
Only in regards to your music production abilities. Everything else stays the same.
Mhm.
What are some lessons you would tell the earlier you to avoid some of the pitfalls you had? What are some stuff that you've learned that you just go, I can't believe I didn't do that at the start?
I mean, I don't think maybe just sort of experimenting a little bit more, I would say, because sometimes you have this sort of formula and you want to use that formula and just continue that because it's worked. But I think part of art and part of music is sort of branching out, being creative. Some artists don't really want to do that because they know, like, they've made a sound, they've established an identity for themselves, so they might not want to sort of make something very different. I think maybe that aspect, and also I would say thinking a lot about a song or making it overcomplicating. I think at the end of the day, if you keep things simple, go with the basic steps, it can go a long way. Like, if you look at some of the music that's out there right now, it's just a lot of good music that's executed just in simple principles, and they become big hits. So
What's some music that you enjoy listening to? What are some of your favorites?
nowadays, I'm really into like deep and future house. So if you like on Dubways, it's probably comes out because like a lot of their music is in that vibe. Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of deep house, future house. So there's a lot of different artists there. So
Well, you gave me a fantastic playlist recently where what was it, Overnight by Parcels? I thought that was, is that the,
oh yeah,
that was on there. There was a couple of other really good ones
Yeah.
on there. How do you source the music that you're ultimately going to be review? Because I think, at least in Sydney where we live, there's like this huge cachet of being like, I found it first, and you always seem to find it first.
Yeah.
So how do you find it first? How are you beating everyone
No,
to the
I'm not
punch?
beating- I mean, I'm not beating anyone. I mean, I just sort of like it's all over the place. There's no formula. Like, I have a few websites, and I sort of go through YouTube. I might actually listen to a couple of like maybe some DJs in Europe or something like that, and just see what kind of songs they're playing as well. I might select something there, or pick some sort of like obscure remix that hasn't been played as often. Just I can't really.
It's basically giving everyone, you're learning the secrets to being a successful DJ in my show. I'm stealing the formula. What would be the first piece of advice you'd give to a young person who kind of wanted to get into your concept? There's a lot of people who listen to this. Some of them are a little bit younger, and some of them really want to do it. And I think that, especially as a society, we're pretty quick to tell people you can't do this, you can't do that, you suck, you're not going to be able to. And you've carved a path, and I think that that's kind of the reason that it's so important, and I'm so happy for you to be on my show, because you have carved this path. What would be the piece of advice you'd give to that 18-year-old, 19-year-old, even 30-year-old, 40, 60-year-old who wants to become a music producer and doesn't know where to start? What's the first steps you do? What's the first thing you ask them to sort of learn about, understand? How do they start?
I think from the basics, you probably have to have an understanding of music theory or have some, maybe like, I would say it's probably better, like if you have some sort of understanding of music theory or maybe can start learning an instrument,
Yep.
piano, guitar, something like that,
Yep.
to build off of. And afterwards, then just sort of build on like learning about production and things like that, either unprofessionally or professionally through some sort of education or learning off like online through YouTube and things like that. So, and at the end of the day, I think it's just your passion and determination and just like pushing through, no matter like what other people say or whatever people think about you. I think you should just go through it because at the end of the day, like you're doing it for. At least for myself, I'm doing it for the enjoyment of like the satisfaction I get when I see the reaction of people when they listen to the music, or they might send me messages about like they've had this memory with this podcast or this song. Like you just have to go with that mindset and just keep pushing. Like there's gonna be with anything, there's gonna be some ups and downs, but if you push through, you'll probably get it.
And this might be a silly question. If nobody in the world listened to your podcast, if tomorrow for some reason people stop listening, would you still keep producing?
The beginning was like that. I mean, I was making all these mixes. I was making it on like CDs. I was giving it to my friends. There's probably like 5 people listening, but I was still pushing. Like, you know, at the beginning when the podcast was taking off, there wasn't a lot of listeners. Now when podcast comes out, there might be like 1 million plays for each episode, which is like very cool.
Yeah, it's awesome, dude.
Like, it might be cool. Like, so I mean that's good. And nowadays when I'm putting out content, like I'm fortunate that there's at least an audience that listens and is able to connect with that music in some way.
But I guess what I'm trying to ask is, do you really just do it for you, and you're lucky that people like also enjoy it? Like it comes from a place deep inside. Like it has to come out somehow.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm not like DJing live recently. I'm only doing these podcasts every month, and I'm making music, and it's all basically like because of hobbies. It's like what I enjoy, and I used to do some live shows like when I flew to like San Francisco, Toronto, or like did some shows in Vancouver. But nowadays, I think it's more like I just want the content there. I want people just to enjoy it. It's just out of my
it's because you love music.
I just love music, and that's it. Yeah.
And tell me this: what's it like being a DJ on the stages of San Francisco and Toronto? That's awesome. Like, how does that feel? How does it feel to perform to a live? How is it different to be kind of a and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I usually am. DJing is when you're doing it in front of a live audience. You've got your production, and it's happening sort of in tandem with the audience's reaction. Is that correct?
To a certain extent, yeah.
And production is you create it in a studio, you work collaboratively with other artists, or you complete it yourself, and it's all done sort of and then released.
Yeah, I mean, some of the more technical DJs nowadays, they also create and perform live, which is really cool, and I like seeing that as well. So they might use some like audio controllers while they're DJing, use some samples and things like that.
Yep.
So it might be an element of live production and DJing, which is cool.
What did you enjoy about performing live? Like well, obviously, take me through that. What was it like?
Yeah, I mean, before when I used to perform live, there was sort of a process I would go through. Like, like beforehand, I would just kind of imagine like what kind of set I would want to play, and I might have a playlist. For example, if it's an hour-long set, I might have a playlist of like 2 hours, 3 hours of songs, just in case. And then I'll just kind of maybe, I don't know, it's like visualization. I don't know, something.
No. Look, what I'm trying to kind of get at is, so from my perspective, I've started this because I've realized how kind of lack of knowledge I have about general, really interesting stuff like music production. And the more I talk to people, the more I see that there's like these underlying themes. Like we talked extensively a few podcasts about visualization and how it's critical to the success of Pedro Lara, who was, I think, episode 3, about how it was critical to his success. And I keep seeing this term visualization come out, where people who are really good at what they do, before they do it, they think about, look, it's going to come out like this. It's going to have this feeling, this intention, this passion. Have you found that to be the case?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like that's part of the thing I kind of miss about performing live is that before the show, there's that lead up, I'm just imagining what's gonna go down, and then when I'm performing, I'm sort of gauging the audience's reaction. I'm just making changes on the fly. So it's I think it's definitely a part of not even music, just everything else. I think it's very important to sort of have that idea.
And with regards to music theory, with regards to the understanding of music theory, in your experience, how do you mix together things that are so different? So, for example, Iranian music is usually 4/4. Like that's just it's got a relatively repetitive beat, except for some of the
Six
stuff
to
I've
eight, yeah.
sorry 6 to 8. That's right. And it's European music tends to be a bit different.
Yeah.
So, how do you kind of bridge that gap? How do you
Mhm.
find that there's these how do you combine these? It really is East meets West. How do you pull it off?
Yeah, I mean, before when I used to do those kind of live shows, it's very tricky. So it was very tricky. I don't know how
You
to
played
say.
an Iranian song and then the Macarena.
Yeah, I mean, like it takes a lot of practice and sort of you pick songs that are maybe a combination that might have like a flavor of some of the Western style
Yeah.
music, even though it's like an Iranian song, and then you transition to something else. Like there's those things. So I think just having a big database, listening to a lot of music, I think is very important as well because you're constantly listening, consuming this sort of information, developing your own ideas, and then sort of feeding it back to the audience. So
And with what are some trends you've been seeing in music production? So, what are some things that you're seeing that are kind of changing the game? Is there a new sort of feel, vibe, energy? What are you seeing as being the direction of the future?
right. I mean, in terms of electronic music, definitely deep house, future house. I think that's sort of coming up.
So,
in the
what is
trend.
future house? I'm not familiar with that term.
Like future house? I don't know how to describe it, but it's like it's more like
House
it's
of the
like
future.
it's more bass. There's a lot of bass. It's a little bit more heavy hitting than deep house. Sort of similar. I think progressive house is sort of coming up as well. You can listen on radio. There might be some elements of the two in there. And then of course, like if you consider like hip hop, R&B, is the past couple of years, trap has been sort of gaining popularity as well. So I really don't know where it's gonna head in the future, but like I think definitely there's a lot of electronic music. The sounds of electronic music are coming into top 40 tunes. Music quality and production quality is increasing. Like you're getting stronger, cleaner, like louder songs as well. Like everyone's just constantly stepping up the game, which is quite interesting. So
Now, I'm gonna talk about a dirty word that I'm sure DJs don't like talking about. It starts with M. Marketing.
marketing, yeah.
How have you found the marketing game to be? How is it? You may have the best music in the world, but if
Yeah.
people don't know about you,
Oh,
they're
yeah.
not going to be able to listen to you. So, how did you find marketing when you started versus marketing now? Now that you've got over 1 million sort of listens, you've obviously hit a critical mass, probably because you've produced consistent work regularly, and you've been
Yeah.
firstly, how do you market yourself, and secondly, how do you feel about the general marketing of the music production world? I'm giving you.
I'm probably like not the best to sort of comment on it because my marketing has been not so great over the past couple of years. To be honest, I've just been so busy with the work and everything else. I mean, probably haven't marketed it as well. Like I've just used social media to the very basic extent, but nowadays people have sort of developed this presence online, like whether it be an Instagram page or like other forms of social media, constantly putting like videos and pictures and things like that. They might even have a team behind them. So definitely, if you make even the best song and no one hears about it, then that's really difficult. I've been fortunate to work with like Radio Java, which is like the biggest Iranian music website. So I've sort of grown with them, and they have a lot of listeners. So just by nature, whenever I put up music, it's just spread to the community, and then it just sort of goes from there. So I don't know. It's really can't really say too much about it because like I've been out of it in that aspect.
And with let's talk about kind of. I've done your head in about music production. I can see it in your eyes. You're doing great. You're being very political with me. You're being very kind. Let's talk about some of the traits that you have used to build this, because I think that's probably just as important as the concept itself. How do you bring yourself? I imagine. Well, take me through this. You're a resident.
Yeah.
What does that mean? How many hours a week would you work in a hospital roughly?
It can vary, but depends. It might be just like a 45-hour week, or it could be longer if you're working overtime. So it might be 60 hours, or you might be also for like 80 hours, depending on nights.
And I
So-
envisage that after an 80-hour week, you don't want to produce some. I don't think it'd be easy to produce that. How did you develop the discipline to kind of ensure that every month on the month I'm going to be producing something? How did you develop that skill set, and how did those resources that you've developed help you in
Yeah.
your practice?
I think I've always had this sort of mentality: if you're gonna do something, at least do it right. And I wanted to have a podcast that people on the 15th of every month, for example, they're gonna expect a podcast. You know, there was probably one time where I didn't put out a podcast ever out of like 100 episodes, like on time. But the rest of the time, I mean, like I know people are waiting for it, and like people message me a few days before, even if it's delayed like a day or so. People are like, "What's going on?" Everyone's like kind of anticipating it. So first of all, like making sure that I'm delivering the content for everyone, even though it's like I'm just putting it out there. I just kind of wanted something that when I look back, I'd be like, you know, I created something thanks to like all the producers out there that as well contribute to this, and people are getting this sort of high quality content every month, and it's very consistent. And even like with work and everything else, like I sort of can manage it, because if you think of it as like, I don't know, working out, this is like my sort of outlet. So even after an 80-hour week, I might be like, you know what, I'm just gonna go sit down and just play some piano or something, or just like put together some music for the podcast. You know, it de-stresses me, and that's a good outlet. So
And I think one of the things that most astounds me about your story is this: now that you've reached this stage, you've got this platform. But how did you approach when you first started, big dog music producers, big dog other people, and ask for help? How did you, what was the process of that? Because I think that terrifies people. People are really scared that if they ask for help, people will say, "No, you're an idiot. Give up." Da da da. I've found in my life that yes, that's happened. I've been rejected far more times than I can count, but
exactly,
people are generally incredibly helpful if you reach out to them. And
definitely.
take me through that process. You would have been a young music producer. You probably did some stuff, and with respect, it probably wasn't very good because you were
not
just
at all. No, like even looking back, like there's a lot of songs that I produced in the beginning that aren't good. Even now, like some of them, I'm like, I don't know. But I would kind of build something, or at least have a decent demo of, because usually when you make music, there's something called a demo. I'll make a demo, and then I would just send it, because I'm like, if I don't send this, then I'm never gonna see the reaction. Like I'm never gonna know,
Yeah.
And what's the worst thing that can happen? Like in any case, this person's like a famous artist or whatever. He's not gonna reply, so there's nothing to lose. Like the best case scenario is that he'll reply, or he or she will reply and be like, "Yo, let's collaborate, let's do something." And that consistently happened at the beginning. So it might have been like, I don't know, a remix for this like famous hip hop group, or an original production for this other performer. It started from something. I just reached out, and then it grew. Maybe it's because the music industry is also very small, and the Iranian music industry. So I don't know.
So do you think that understanding your niche really well and understanding your sort of end user really well, you were telling me that you kind of get messages, you get correspondence. A lot of people are really connecting with you. You've got super fans.
Yeah.
Are they pretty vocal with you when it's not what they like?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, if there's a bad remix or production, they'd be like, or the podcast even, they might be like, "Oh, I didn't like this one. Like, what's going on? You should probably like try to make it like, I don't know, episode 55 or something." They're like, "Okay, like,
wow."
all right." Like, or but then on the other hand, they might be like, "Oh, this is great. Like, can you teach me this? Can you like tell me some tips about how I can sort of move forward?" And so there's always this sort of back and forth. And I always, if I have time, I try to respond to them. Like just last night, there was someone that messaged me, and they're like, "I've made this music. Can you give me some comments?" And I had the time, so I just responded. And like, I kind of like that. You do work together, and maybe there might be some tips you can offer. I'm not an expert by any means. Like I'm learning constantly. So I'm just a very basic producer.
No, but look,
You know, like
yeah, look,
very second.
I think the problem is that you're the most humble person in the
No.
music industry. I mean, I was
No.
expecting Ludacris in here being, I'm the best, we're the
No.
best, and you know, you're being just super nice as you always are, and I think that's awesome. What do you think about that attitude of humility and that attitude of just I'm still a student, I'm still learning? Has that been to your benefit?
Oh yeah, definitely. Because if you have that mindset, then you're sort of constantly growing, and I think it's important that you're always learning. There's always something new in any field. Like constantly, you just have to have that mindset that I'm not the best. Even when you're at the top of the game, you know, there's always going to be someone who might just push ahead of you. So
And having worked with people really at the tip of the spear, at the top of the game, have you noticed that the ones that tend to last and the ones that are doing the best have that attitude and have that mindset?
oh yeah, definitely. They're constantly, you know, they might be changing their approach or modifying it based on the trends or like just, you know, I think it's a fluid process, very dynamic. So
And what do you how do you incorporate some of the feedback that you've we were talking about feedback a little bit
Yeah.
earlier. How do you incorporate some of the feedback that may not have been given in the most constructive thing? I mean, I imagine at the start it's quite difficult. What's it like? Somebody you produce something and it sucks. It's
Yeah.
not up to your standards. It's
Yeah.
not up to society's standards.
yeah,
How do you deal with that? How do you develop those skills?
I think at the beginning I was very sensitive to sort of those comments. Later I'd be like, oh, this guy's like, I don't know, he's performing live. He's such a basic like DJ. He's just a kid. And then like I get very like taken back from that statement. But nowadays, if there's some sort of comment, I'm like, you know, everyone's entitled to opinion. I might actually like take a step back and be like, hey, maybe he's like onto something. Like I might listen to it, or it might just be out of nowhere. Like some people just want to write something online. So
Just troll.
exactly, yeah. So that's the thing about social media, and like you just there's all kinds of people out there. So you kind of get desensitized in a way as well to these comments after a while. But there's a big luckily there's unfortunately my like listener and my like fan base has been very supportive and positive so far. So
Kind of switching gears, if we could for a second, what is in, and this is a really tough question, so feel free to just access 5 or 6. What would you say is one of the highlights, if you were to say of being a music producer? What is one moment that jumps out at you that you go, this is so cool, I can't believe I'm doing this?
I think one of I like just something that came to me was there's this Iranian artist. His name is Zanya, for example. I made a remix for him, and I always wanted to collaborate with him. And in Iran, he has live performances in like the biggest hall. You know, it's called like Milad Tower, basically. Like, he essentially took my remix and then gave it to his band, and then the band performed it live in front of everybody. And like at that stage, I was like, this is so cool. Like that I was creating something, and then it was performed by a live band in front of like Iranian audience, and it was sort of legit. And he sort of like I don't know, it was just such a cool experience that you're sort of able to create something from this side of the world, and then it's taken to another side of the world, and
That is
it's
awesome.
yeah, it's very cool. Yeah.
I didn't know that story. That's a
Yeah.
cool story.
Yeah, it's very interesting. But
What about a moment that you wanted to give up and it sounded like, why am I doing this to myself? Do you have one of those moments? Because they're not all highs. Was there ever a moment where you were just like, no, this sucks. I've done it. I've had it. I'm over it.
I mean, there might be some times where like I make music and I'm constantly like frustrated with myself. I'm like, you're just constantly making this like this isn't a good beat, or like you work on something and then you put it aside. I don't think there's ever been a moment where I'm like, oh, I'm never gonna like make music, or I'm not. Maybe like DJing, there might be a point where I'm like, you know what, the podcast might just end. But I don't. That day I don't think is here yet. So I mean,
how do you deal with that voice of criticism in your own head?
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about the voice outside, but how do you sort of channel that? This beat isn't good enough. You're a fraud. You're just a basic DJ. How do you deal with that voice? What do you tell that voice when you're in the middle of something and it's just up in your face?
I think it's a good voice actually because on one side, like it's very critical, and I agree with it. It's like, what is this? Like, this is not good. Like, I don't know, if you look in the folder of my music production folder, it might be like 100 songs or something, and I've only released like a handful or something. So I think having that critical aspect is good, and you sort of have to negotiate with yourself. You're like, maybe it's not that bad. Maybe I can sort of work on it. So you just have to kind of, I don't know, take breaks, step back, do some other stuff, and then revisit it with a new perspective. Maybe it might just be the next day, and you're just like listening to it again, and you're like, wow, this is good, or like, no, this is horrible. Like, what was I thinking? You know, I mean, it's just constant struggle, but yeah, it's.
I think that's the artist struggle, isn't
Yeah.
it? I mean, you're not alone in this.
Yeah.
You know, you read about. I was reading. I think it was Picasso, and it was his personal journals, and he's like, "I'm a fraud. I will never succeed. This art is garbage." I think it's just the struggle of art, isn't it? And
Yeah,
it's,
definitely.
you know, and I think all good artists go through that. We're coming kind of to the tail end of things, and what are 3 things from your concept that we can kind of walk away with? So, you know, if I'm at a dinner party tonight and somebody mentions music production, I can be like, hey,
Yeah.
I know some stuff about that from listening to this podcast. What are 3 things that really jump out at you, and what are the 3 big takeaways from music production? And it doesn't necessarily need to be a music production itself. It's what are 3 things that we can talk about in this realm that sort of you think would spark a valuable discussion?
Yeah. Probably first of all, making a song, I think, is a whole journey in itself. There's a process that starts from before the song is even made. There's a concept, then there's the producer, it has to be mixed and mastered. So there's a multi-step process that I think everyone has to sort of consider. So when you're listening to a song, I think if you have an open mind and you listen to it, you listen to all the layers and all the different technical aspects, I think that's important to consider. And that it might not be from a specific studio or something. It might just be someone who's just, you know, coming from their house or just producing it off their laptop, and then it's sent off to a professional studio in the end. I think that's important to consider. Second thing, maybe I think, is that at the end of the day, when we're listening to music, we're consuming something. So I think people should appreciate good music. They should, you know, share good music with their friends.
Yep.
And share it as well in the community, because some people are just, they're new artists, they're up and coming, and getting more listeners, getting a bigger fan base, it means the world to them. So even just a few plays, and it can go a long way. Third one, I don't know, like in terms of music production, like I think, I don't know.
Well,
I mean,
look, one thing that I would kind of, if I could steal and kind of ask for your elaboration on, is
yeah,
the music producers that make it,
yeah.
using the air quotes, and the ones that don't, what do you think separates them? What's that one something that makes someone succeed at this versus someone who doesn't?
I think there's a technical aspect, there's an educational like background, the person who's professionally trained, I think, has a higher
Yeah, of
success
course.
of moving forward. But obviously that passion, that drive, that instinct, and that emotion behind every song, and that overall like creativity, which is something that you might not really be able to learn, but it's just something that you just pick up with experience, whether it be your life experience, your work experience, everything else. You just put it together and put it into that one song, and then I think, yeah.
No,
those things are
absolutely,
different, so,
absolutely. That's the magnum opus.
yeah.
Everybody, this has been episode 5 of Concepts with Kalantar. Thank you so much to my guest, Dr. Ariane Furusbacht, who is DJ AFX and educating us on the concepts of music production. I'll see you guys all next week. Bye, everybody. Thank you again.
Thanks so much for having me.